Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the headlines of this hour. As SCO Summit has commenced in full fervor, the leaders at the summit in Tianjin have discussed war, terrorists, and setting a new world order. At the summit, Chinese President Xi has pledged $280 million in grants to SCO member states this year. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told Russian President Vladimir Putin that Ankara is working for a fair and lasting peace in Ukraine, with talks in Istanbul contributing to the effort on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China. The International Association of Genocide Scholars, with 500 members, have passed a resolution declaring that Israel's policies and actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide under the 1948 UN Convention. This marks the strongest formal academic condemnation yet of Israel's campaign in Gaza. Unification Church leader in South Korea has stated that she directed the group to bribe former First Lady Kim Kyung-hee or politician Kwon Sang-don, as South Korea faces a widening criminal probe into former President Yoon Suk-yeol and his wife. Former First Lady Kim was indicted on Friday as she is accused of accepting $57,631 in bribes. South Korea has suspended its military radio to North Korea for the first time in 15 years as part of efforts to ease tensions with Pyongyang. This is according to Seoul's defense ministry. The broadcast, which included news about the North's regime, South Korean economic development, and K-pop, had been a key tool of psychological warfare. The death toll from a powerful earthquake in eastern Afghanistan has risen to over 800 people now, with most casualties in Kunar province, according to Taliban government spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid. He has also added that about 2,500 people have been injured. A helicopter with 2 crew members and 6 passengers on board went missing in south of Indonesia, and a search operation is underway. The local rescue agency has said that the aircraft disappeared in the area of Mantewi, according to the local rescue agency. A Pakistani military helicopter has crashed in the northern Gilgit-Baltistan region, killing 4 personnel, including 2 pilots, after developing a technical fault, according to a Pakistani military official. The aircraft went down near while flying from Gilgit to Chilas in the strategic mountainous area. Today marks the second day of the SCO Summit, which is being held in Tianjin in China. This year's summit comes amid Russia's ongoing war with Ukraine, Israel's war in Gaza, and amid Trump's global trade war. At the SCO Plus Summit today afternoon, Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that house rules of a few countries should not be imposed on others. He has also emphasized the need for reform and improvement in the global governance system, stressing that the SCO must work to promote a more democratic and equitable international order. He further noted that the organization should take a leading role in advancing global governance initiatives while upholding the principles of non-alignment and non-confrontation. Now for this discussion, we are joined by William Yang. He's a China analyst, joins us live from Taipei, and Alexei Zakharov. He's a fellow Strategic Studies Program Observer Research Foundation, joins us live from New Delhi. And also retired Major General Sanjay Meston. He's a defense geopolitical expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you to all our guests for joining us today. I would first like to go to retired Major General Sanjay Meston. What role does China play in shaping Russia's international posture through platforms like the SCO?
Yeah, definitely. I think the SCO is an important forum. And one of the key highlights is, of course, that the three major nations of Asia or Eurasia have been involved in this entire process. Besides, there were totally other 7 nations who are part of the SCO. And there are many dialogue partners who were also attending it, and some of the observer status countries were also attending it. Now, the three major powers, they are, I think now, a very, very clear message goes out that the international order needs to be revised or changed. The predominance of the international order, which has been going on till date, is West dominated, and especially by the United States. And therefore, they generally seek their self interest first, and the rest of the world is forgotten. With this SCO declaration this time, I think the message is very clear that there needs to be a revival of the international order, and therefore it is now leading to multipolarity. And therefore, there are going to be many countries who are going to be involved in this multipolarity. Unipolarity is not going to be over. And I think this augurs very well for the entire world, because no one can be a unique policeman of this world. Every country has a right to exist and live. And therefore, no one should be governed only by one philosophy or one diktat. Therefore, all the countries, especially the countries who are powerful equally, like India, China, and Russia. On one hand, it is Brazil, then of course South Africa, and many more countries. For example, the African Union or the African Unity. All these countries are a very, very important factor, and therefore the rise of global South is now what is emerging, and therefore it leads to multilateralism, which is a requirement. So I think on that account, and you, in your opening remarks, have also mentioned about the ongoing war, Russia-Ukraine war, of course, the Israel-Hamas war, and also the trade and tariff war, which has been commenced by one personality, President Trump. These three wars, obviously, have an important outcome for the entire world. Everyone is impacted. And rightfully so, our Prime Minister today, during a bilateral meeting with President Putin, has again reiterated that the Russia-Ukraine war needs to be finished earliest. It needs to be resolved. Somehow no one is focusing on the Israel-Gaza war or Israel-Hamas war. That continues unabated. And I think the Trump's this tariff and trade warfare is also unacceptable, because he singularly cannot dictate things to the entire world. He is not a unipolar policeman. It is a world trade order which is being effected. So I think to that effect, the SCO has taken a good momentum towards multipolarity.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, building on that answer, I would like to ask a question from William. William, what do you think this deeper alignment with China of Russia risk further isolating Russia from other global partners?
I think this is a very interesting moment, kind of looking at what might be some of the strategic options for Russia going forward as the global efforts to try to mediate a peace talk between Russia and Ukraine continues. I think the current dynamic surrounding the Ukraine war remains very fluid and uncertain. Because we haven't really seen a clear direction with regard to how the efforts to try to bring an end to the war is likely going to be, and where it is heading. So I think at the moment, Russia, in fact, probably feels further strengthened and emboldened with regard to the level of support that it receives, especially, I think, with the powerful image of the three leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Xi Jinping, and President Vladimir Putin being on the sidelines and having somewhat of a friendly chat before the start of today's summit. So it will be interesting to see the role that SCO is likely going to play going forward with the global efforts to try to bring an end to the war continues, but the direction remains murky and uncertain.
With that in mind, now I would like to ask Alexei Zakharov's take on this. What do you think? Could deeper alignment with China risk further isolating Russia, or it can play the opposite?
Well, I think there is no such prospect of isolating Russia as of now, because actually summits like this one and Tianjin are showing that Russia has managed to break through the isolation. There were attempts to isolate it from global markets. There are attempts from Western countries to isolate Russia from the Western part of the world in a way. But Russia has been able to reach out to the global south through multilateral platforms, through series of bilateral initiatives, through proposing its commodities for affordable prices. So now I think we should put a question in a different format. As previous speakers mentioned, now we should look at how global south can play a role to probably build these bridges between Russia and the Western world in an attempt to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war eventually. At the moment, we see that even though the SCO is focusing on many different topics, primarily focuses on security, there was a bold statement on terrorist issue. Some important mentions were made in the joint declaration, important mentions for India. But I think that the discussions around Ukraine, they are mainly happening at an informal level, either through informal talks between the leaders or in a very cursory way during their official statements. So it remains to be seen in the upcoming days what are the deliverables of these talks and whether there is a real path to peace going forward.
Right. With that in mind, thank you very much to all our guests. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Moscow highly values the efforts and proposals of China, India for reaching a settlement in Ukraine, where Russia launched its offensive in 2022. Putin has made these comments during the Shanghai Cooperation Summit in China. Let's listen into the comments.
В этой связи мы широко ценим усилия и предложения Китая, Индии, других наших стратегических партнеров, призванные содействовать урегулированию украинского кризиса. Отмечу, что
Moreover, the Russian president has appreciated the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as an emerging force in shaping a new multipolar order across Eurasia. Let's listen in.
Конечно, ШОС вносит ощутимый вклад в укрепление атмосферы сотрудничества и взаимного доверия на всем Евразийском континенте, помогая тем самым заложить политические и социально-экономические предпосылки для формирования в Евразии новой системы стабильности, безопасности и мирного развития. Системы, которая пришла бы на смену отжившим евроцентричным и евроатлантическим моделям.
President Putin has also criticized Western countries and their push towards making Ukraine a part of NATO. Let's hear what he has said.
Вторая причина кризиса заключается в постоянных попытках Запада втянуть Украину в НАТО, что, как мы многократно подчеркивали и говорили, причем на протяжении многих лет, представляет прямую угрозу безопасности России.
Now we go back to our discussion with our guests, William Yang, he's a China analyst, and Alexei Zakharov, he's a fellow and Strategic Studies Program Observer, Research Foundation, and our guest, Major General Sanjay Meston. First, I would like to go to Major General Sanjay for my question. Now, with Russia and Ukraine intensifying their strikes on each other, and they continue to do so, how might this impact its relationship within the SCO, especially with other participants who are neutral or less aligned with Russia, the members?
See, I stated even in my earlier remark that this Russia-Ukraine war, in fact, impacts the entire world. Every country is impacted because it affects trade, it affects so many things, and more so, a lot of lives are being lost, innocent lives are being lost of course, soldiers and also children and, many people in Ukraine and Russia. It's coming at a very, very big cost to the world and to the two warring factions or to the two warring countries. Now, what impact does it make on the SCO? I think before SCO, it makes the biggest impact on Russia and Ukraine itself, because both the countries actually today desire peace. There is no doubt. Everyone wants the war to finish at the earliest. And including all the SCO countries, including the West, the will and intent of everyone is clear. The war must finish at earliest. But the whole problem is, how does it finish? Because the hardline approach has been adopted by both Russia and by Ukraine. In the case of Ukraine, they are very clear. They are looking for security guarantees. And number two, they have stated that entire territory has to be vacated by Russia, which is in the Russian occupation. Now, what is the Russian hardline stance? They are also very clear. No security guarantees to Ukraine. And number two, all territories, firstly, I would say Donbass territory, everything to be vacated by the Ukrainian armed forces, including that balance 20%. And of course, the other provinces or oblast, Zaporizhia and Kherson, they also to be occupied, or rather to be under the control of Russia, which they are on ground. Crimea also continues, and maybe the two pockets in Sumy and Kharkiv. Now, once these two sides have approached such a hardline stance, there seems to be no convergence. Even this convergence was tried in Alaska. Now, what is the option to West? West is, of course, simply saying you start imposing sanctions on India, which they have done 50% sanctions, basically America. Of course, not realizing that today Europe Union is the largest importer of gas from Russia. And also they are, I think, the fifth largest importer of oil from Russia. And some of the oil they are getting it through, which is being routed through India, the Russian oil. So in essence, again, President Trump is stating two things. One is, along with the EU or the NATO, impose more sanctions. And number two, give them more weapons, including the Patriot air defense systems, and everything will be routed through EU with their fund. But is it going to stop the war? I doubt. More loss of lives are going to occur. So I think both countries have not to start, compromising on their hard stance, and some point has to evolve where a common ground is evolved between the two factions or the two countries. And I think many countries on that account can help them. See, efforts have failed. In Istanbul, talks happened, they have failed. American efforts have also failed. So I think this hardline approach has to be overcome by both sides. They have to look for a compromising stance where it is a win-win for both and some loss also for both. Till the time that does not happen,
Yes.
I think the war will continue, again at a very expensive cost of loss of lives and everything to both Russia and Ukraine.
Yes. With that in mind, I would like to take our guest, William. William, what do you think? Do you foresee any internal divisions emerging within the SCO over the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
I think there's certainly still not a concrete consensus among all the SCO countries with regard to the ideal path forward to really resolve the war and then reach a peaceful solution. Because I think, again, the SCO at the end of the day is an organization that expands across a very wide geographic landscape and also different geopolitical considerations. And we have some NATO members also as part of the SCO and taking part in this summit. So for this organization to be able to actually sign up to a coherent platform and position, at this particular time on the complicated issue of the Ukraine war remains very difficult and complicated. I think that's why we didn't really see the Ukraine war being at the front and center of the final readout. And rather, I believe all the different member states are still trying to figure out if they can even really find a consistent and a collective position. I think just looking at even China and Russia, I don't really think that Beijing and Moscow now are really aligned with regard to their preferred path and also way to resolve the conflict. I think it remains a very fluid and complicated issue for this particular organization at this point in time.
And building on that, I would like to go to Alexei Zakharov. Alexei, what do you think? Would you like to add something on both our guests' answers?
Yeah, I agree with what was said. I just want to add that importantly, the Russia-Ukraine war or war in Ukraine had no mention in the final declaration from the SCO Summit. I think it's important. It shows us that probably some divisions are still there within the organization, and many member states, they just don't want this declaration to look as if they fully support Russian actions, and at the same time, they don't want to show that they are in any way publicly criticize Russia. That's why the best solution was to avoid any reference to the war, which leaves us guessing what's the real situation within the SCO and its member states. But I agree with the point that even between Russia and its closest partners, there are some gaps in approaches. And I think that many leaders at their meetings with President Putin, they try to make a point that the road to peace should be achieved as soon as possible, because it's really high time that the solution to this war is found. That's why, to my mind, somehow the issue of Ukraine was diluted on the agenda of SCO this year. But at the same time, it's also clear that without resolving this crisis, it's impossible to make serious steps forward on many other issues of SCO agenda.
Thank you for all our guests for joining us and sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. On the sidelines of the SCO Summit, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a statement, the Turkish presidency has said that Erdogan told Putin that Ankara was working to find a fair and lasting end to the war in Ukraine, and that talks between the parties in Istanbul were contributing to peace efforts. Erdogan and Putin also discussed bilateral ties, peace efforts between Azerbaijan and Armenia, Israel's attacks on Gaza, and developments in Syria, the statement has said. At the bilateral, President Putin praised Turkey's role in efforts to resolve this conflict in Ukraine, saying its special role in mediation and diplomacy would continue to be in demand. Let's listen in to what the Russian President Vladimir Putin has said.
Признательны турецким друзьям за весомый вклад в политико-дипломатические усилия по урегулированию украинского кризиса. На Стамбульской площадке с мая этого года прошло уже 3 раунда прямых российско-украинских переговоров, которые позволили продвинуться в решении ряда практических вопросов в гуманитарной сфере. Уверен, что особая роль Турции в этих делах будет востребована и далее.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with William Yang. He's a China analyst. Alexei Zakharov, he's a fellow at Strategic Studies Program. And our guest, retired Major General Sanjay Meston. Thank you for staying with us patiently throughout this discussion. I'd first like to go to William for this question. How do you interpret President Erdogan's diplomatic strategy at the SCO Summit amid escalating military actions of Russia-Ukraine war?
I believe Erdogan, his position represents, in fact, a significant portion of, I think, the middle powers in the world that, I mean, there are very few countries that can actually still play an important role of going between Russia and Ukraine to really have an effect on facilitating constructive talks. So it is very important for him to come up and actually voice that, I think, commitment to help to continue to promote that, because I think as at this point in time, some of the countries that both sides can still trust and really have faith in actually being able to go between Moscow and Kiev is in fact Turkey and probably India to some extent, but maybe less so, as now we are seeing India doubling down a little bit on the relationship with Russia at a time when its relationship with the US faces more strain. So I think going forward, it will be very important to see how the US in particular try to involve Turkey or try to consult with Turkey to move forward with the peace talk effort. But at this point, we are not really seeing the US government really leaning into some of its important NATO allies' ability to go between Kiev and Moscow to be able to make significant progress when it comes to the peace process.
And with that in mind, I would like to ask Alexei Zakharov, do you think this Turkey can Turkey sustain this balancing act without compromising its core economic or security interests in SCO?
Well, so far it has been successful in, finding a fine line between different conflicting parties. So Turkey has been presenting itself as a diplomatic hub for various discussions around Ukraine, not only war in itself, but also some economic initiatives to unlock and, in a way, untie this issue, because there was a Black Sea grain initiative where Turkey played an important role, for example. There have been a series of diplomatic talks between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul, and a series of agreements to exchange prisoner of wars. Turkey is also presenting itself as an energy hub. So Russia has been trying to reroute some of its gas supplies through Turkey. And also, importantly, thanks to its geography, Turkey can, in a way, indirectly control many Russian shipments through Black Sea and onwards that are going to global markets. It's very important for the Russian economic interests. So I think that given the recent participation of Turkey in the various multilateral platforms, not only SCO but expanded BRICS format as well, I think that it has been successful in navigating between different parties.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, I would like to ask Major General Sanjay Meston's view on this. How do you see Turkey is sustaining this balancing act?
See, Turkey has, firstly, Turkey is a NATO member, and it has attempted, I think, 5 rounds of talks in Istanbul were held. And to some extent, the repatriation of PWs was definitely on the cards, and it was organized. And I think Qatar had also played a little important role on that. And India also plays a role. The fact is that we have been, our Prime Minister has been even to Russia, and of course he has also been to Kyiv and met President Zelensky. And you had seen the emotions which our Prime Minister had reflected in his visit to Ukraine. So I will just give you a highlight. The Korean War 50 to 53 was almost 3 years. The armistice agreement took many years or a lot of efforts to get it signed, and I think India had a very important role. It went right up to the UN General Assembly, and remember, again, it was a war between, I would say, the communist and the West. That was the party line, the West and the communist. Of course, the countries affected were directly South Korea and North Korea. So you are aware it took time, and thereafter India had to send even a custodian peacekeeping force. We had sent it. And some of the PWs we had got them to India, South Koreans and North Koreans also. And some of them have actually got amalgamated in the Indian society. So I feel India also has a role. But only thing is, whether it is Turkey, whether it is India, whether it is US, or whether it is NATO countries, or I would say Europe, the whole problem is where is the compromising line between the two sides, Russia and Ukraine. Till the time they don't come down on their stance, and I mentioned the stance to you, they have defined the two stated objectives or terms of reference very, very clear. Security, guarantees, and territory. In both ways, they have stood their ground very, very firmly. And therefore, President Trump is only looking further imposing sanctions and, of course, trying to pressurize India and at the same time looking to give them more weapons. But till date, it has not resulted in any solution. Solution has to come between Russia and between Ukraine. They have to develop a compromising stance somewhere. And I think countries like India can also try to help because the negotiation is very difficult. We have seen so many countries have attempted that. We have just discussed Turkey. But the two fighting countries, they have to take a clear-cut line because some compromise has to be there. And maybe Europe Union has now a very, very important role. See, rather than fueling fire more, they have to now think of preventing the loss of Ukrainian lives and their territory. At the end, as on date, I think Ukraine has not gained much. They have lost about 20% of their overall territory. So many soldiers have lost their lives. The country is, getting bombarded every day. Even Russia has suffered. But I think Europe Union now has to take a call. Their strategy of earlier arming Ukraine and sanctions has not worked. So some kind of a different strategy has to be resolved with the intent and the end state being how to end this war. This is now what they have to look for. And since they are also one of the parties to this conflict, including the United States, I think the ball should be more in their court and they have to look for some other strategic alternatives of the options.
Thank you very much to all our guests. William Yang, he's a China analyst. Alexei Zakharov, he's a fellow at Strategic Studies Program. And Major General Sanjay Meston for all joining us and sharing your insights throughout this news. Thank you very much. This is all we have time for, but we will continue this special coverage on the SCO Summit. Stay tuned.